Live from our 7 Tasmania studios, your nightly news with Louise Hubar begins now.
Good evening. Days after Tasmania was admitted to the AFL, the first change to local footy has been confirmed. The TSL will be axed next year, with the 7 clubs returning to regional footy. The news receiving a mixed response, with one club threatening to quit the state.
For North Launceston, the TSL has given them some of its proudest moments, winning 5 premierships in 6 years between 2014 and 2019. The club's president says it's producing high-quality talent.
It just needs a bit more love and care, a bit more direction, and it's already kicking goals.
But it's now set to become history, with AFL Tasmania confirming via a press release the final siren will sound at the end of the 2024 season. The CEO says he wants 3 strong regions to underpin our new teams. However, the Bombers warn it could undermine our AFL bid.
Risk is there now that people in northern Tasmania are not going to adopt the Tasmanian team.
Also threatening to look interstate.
Well, perhaps there's a competition on the mainland that sits under the VFL and will create a point of difference and will travel. 2
Hobart clubs, however, support the move.
Certain players, they don't have the appetite with travel and sometimes even with the following.
With an AFL team, and as soon as it's underpinned by a VFL team, then there's no logical reason for a statewide league.
Scott Wade played in the first statewide league and helped launch the current model. He says not everyone thought it was kicking goals.
Players loved it, coaches loved it, supporters didn't like it at all.
Clubs have until May 31 to commit to one final season. Despite wanting to exit this year, the Roos boss believes it will get a farewell.
We can't play in a competition by ourselves, so I suspect that we'll commit to the competition for one more year.
John Hunt, 7 Tasmania News.
Funding commitments to the new stadium have sparked a wave of pleas from other sectors. Nurses are now calling for a similar cash splash to rescue the health system.
With a stadium now funded to get Mac Point rockin', other causes needing cash have come a knockin'.
And whilst our members aren't experts in the area of football and stadiums, what we do know is that we have called for a similar type of investment.
Saying the ailing health system needs the same tonic.
We'd be able to be competitive in terms of recruiting appropriate numbers of health professionals, both nurses and midwives, but other clinicians.
The Premier's rebuttal? We already are investing like that.
Every 51 days, we invest $375 million into our health system.
Today announcing $2 million for community health programs. Meanwhile, the union representing paramedics claims staffing is still strained.
It's bad and it just continues to be bad and there is no light at the end of the tunnel.
The Deputy Premier should be funding Northern Suburbs light rail, according to Labor.
He has deliberately avoided developing this corridor over 10 years. He's ordered consultants' reports, starting from the premise that you have to rip the track up.
What's important is that we work hard to activate better transport solutions. And the transit corridor, rapid bus transit, is exactly part of that plan.
The near $1 billion stadium, and what the funds could have been spent on instead, is going to form an easy punchline for years to come. State Parliament resumes next week. The government can expect a few questions about exactly that.
I'm ready for anything.
By then, the good news of the licence announcement, long in the past. Josh Duggan, 7 Tasmania News.
The search for missing 14-year-old Cheyenne Lee Tatnall continued today. Police divers searched Launceston's North Esk River and the Henry Street area this afternoon, the place where she was last seen on Sunday night. Anyone who has information or knows where she might be is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. Police say those who care for her are desperate for her to come home. Tasmanians in 3 upper house seats will head to the polls tomorrow. Residents in the Legislative Council seats of Rumney in Hobart's Eastern Reaches, Murchison, which covers the state's west coast and far northwest, and Launceston are required to vote. Progressive tallies are expected tomorrow evening. Wheelchair taxis will be required to make more wheelchair passenger trips in a bid to boost accessibility. They'll have to make at least 30 a month to ensure people aren't left in a queue of bookings. Deputy Premier Michael Ferguson says the vehicles are an important lifeline. The subsidy will also increase to fairly compensate drivers, while the vehicle's lifespan will be extended. Launceston residents could face a 4.5% rate hike as part of the City of Launceston's draft budget. Council is predicting a $136 million spend for the next financial year, with several major projects earmarked for funding, among them upgrades to the Princess Theatre. The budget is now open for community consultation. And the Newtown rivulet is set to be transformed, with Hobart and Glenorchy councils joining forces to restore the local eyesore and return it to its former state. Boosting native wildlife is front of mind, with 10,000 trees to be planted to prevent the bank's erosion.
Be just better for both filtration of the water, but also for flood mitigation purposes, as well as improving biodiversity as well.
We are keen to hear the community's feedback through the channels that we offer, through the online consultation process, plus happy to hear and have conversations with community about what they want to see along the rivulet. It's a significant investment that the two councils are jointly making.
The local community can give feedback on the Your Say website. Two special celebrations have created an afternoon of royal fanfare in Burnie as the local community prepares for the historic event. A regal high tea fit for a soon-to-be coronated king, and a milestone birthday for royalty a little closer to home.
Turning 105 is no small feat, but for Joyce Dinelli, it's just another day.
How do I feel? No difference.
The Burnie resident humbled by all the extra attention on her special birthday, crediting her no-fuss approach to life as the reason why she's reached the day.
No secret, just good health. If you have good health, you'll be 105 soon.
Family, residents and staff joining together to celebrate the guest of honour, the Queen for the day.
Happy birthday, dear Joyce.
Among the festivities, a time for some special cake, marking the milestone with a look back on a life well lived.
It's a privilege and an honour, actually. She's just a nice, honest, simple person.
5 years ago, Joyce received a letter from the late Queen, and as she enters a new year, a new monarch will take over the duties. A pre-coronation high tea rolling out, an array of delights fit for a king. Residents leaning in to their royalist ways as they prepare to mark the special day, some reminiscing on Queen Elizabeth's coronation some 70 years ago.
We had to go to the pictures, to the theatre to see the Queen's coronation. There was no TV around in those days.
All eyes will be firmly glued on screens when history is made tomorrow, many tuning in for the royal day of days.
What everyone's wearing, of course. and yes, and the crown. It's very heavy, apparently. I hope it doesn't fall off.
Victoria Eastoe, 7 Tasmania News.
It's been more than a decade since King Charles visited Tasmania, but his name will forever be linked to one of our cities. On the eve of his coronation, we're taking a look back at his royal tours, including the trip which granted Devonport city status.
After first visiting the Apple Isle beside Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip some years earlier, then Prince Charles had his first major responsibility here in 1981, rolling into Devonport to proclaim it Tasmania's 4th city and first in the northwest.
I shall watch the progress of this city with the greatest of interest.
He even had a vision for the newly christened city.
For instance, fountains running with wine, or double-decker buses instead of single-decker buses.
While Charles lapped up the moment, he shared the spotlight on his next visit 2 years later.
Lady Diana! Lady Diana's Gallipoli!
The public's attention was split as new wife Diana joined him for the trip. The pair had been mobbed by Tasmania's royal watchers as the couple they'd seen only in magazines was in the flesh at last. Crowds piled on the flowers and the affection. Next time in 1994, Charles had the spotlight all to himself again, meeting a patient Hobart audience.
He said, very smart hat.
And they took their hat off to him, meeting those in a southern jobs hub. Before heading west, the papers proclaimed where to see him in Strawn. And the world's media was once again there to capture every moment. Some locals, though, weren't too bothered.
He's only a person just like us, so what's the big deal?
The engagements began from the airstrip with a poodle.
How often do you clip those things?
No dog days here though, just hair of the dog at the local pub, before a visit to the Mount Lyell mine and the town attached.
Queenstown's main street hardly warranted roping off, no crowd control needed.
Where his conservation heart reignited.
There will be very few places left in the world, I guarantee this, where you will have such natural advantages. So all I can say is make the most of them, try and keep them.
And in 2012, his most recent trip starting at Richmond.
We are Australia.
Where his agricultural side was indulged and the public also had a glimpse of Camilla.
Will this be something you'll never forget?
I might forget it.
Unforgettable for most though, now to wait for his first trip here as king. Tom Johnson, 7 Tasmania News.
TasNetworks has delivered dozens of repurposed laptops to the Aboriginal Land Council of Tasmania to help connect the local community. 75 devices were given a new lease on life, with volunteers on hand to train recipients.
We hope that it will assist some of our young people and our elders to better participate in society, particularly in terms of education.
We hope it does something small in terms of bridging that gap and getting over that digital divide, which is far too existing.
TasNetworks hopes the donation will help support education and online literacy. As this year's Uni Review gets ready to break a leg at tonight's opening, there's more in store than just a show. A hilariously wild exhibition is also on display, showcasing some of the more ludicrous highlights over the years.
75 years of Tassie's most politically incorrect play reviewed for all to see.
And it's an immersive way to look at the Uni Review.
A collection of inappropriate memorabilia's been set up at the Theatre Royal in Hobart, shining a dangerously bright light on all things woke with a twist of humour.
Most famously, we've got almost the entire collection of posters from 1948 to 2023. We've got some very special pieces on Lara Giddings, who was in review in 1991 and of course went on to become our first female Labor Premier.
Around 100 items are on display, from costumes to videos to photos.
Rude, lewd, crude and nude, and that's what review is known for.
This year's performance is expected to attract around 7,000 people across 16 shows in Hobart and Launceston. And I've been assured there's something for everyone as long as you're over the age of 15 and can handle a crude joke or two. A number of interesting prizes are also on offer for the best selfie, including a tattoo for your gran.
Every grandmother needs a neck tattoo, dear, as you can see.
For those social media savvy.
Get here early and see the exhibition, spend lots of time and take lots of photos, dear. Take lots of photos and do post them on Instagram.
Ruby Cairns, 7 Tasmania News.
Both Clarence and Glenorchy say they have a point to prove when they renew their rivalry tomorrow. The Roos will be looking to return to the winners list after a disappointing loss to North Launceston. Glenorchy, meanwhile, wants to build on the solid first quarter it played in the loss to North Hobart.
It's important to learn from that, park it and then work off that momentum and that last quarter that we had. And
there were a couple of areas that we were just disappointed and we've sort of ironed out immediately, and that was just our effort-based stuff. But I think we can really tidy that up.
First bounce at Blunston Arena is at 1:30. South Hobart is hoping last week's big Lacko Seljack Cup win will provide a spark to its NPL season. The Reds thumped Glenorchy 7-2 to book a spot in the semi-finals. Facing Riverside this weekend, their coach is hoping their cup form will continue this week.
Against Knights, everything fell for us and the players looked very confident on the field and took their opportunities, and it was pleasant to see.
In the Women's Super League, second place Launceston United is preparing for a hard-fought match against third place Devonport.
It's always a tough game at Valley Road, so yes, all expectations are for a very tough game tomorrow.
Kick-off at Valley Road is at 12:15 tomorrow. Walter Brown is confident he can get more time on court for the Jack Jumpers after committing to the team. The development player signing on until 2026, with the final season set to see him promoted to a roster position. Currently playing in New Zealand's NBL, he says the coach has given him the belief he will get more game time if he works hard.
It's just the work you put in, and every day at training, like Scott watches, Scott's happy to play anyone who's willing to put in the work and show that they've got the stuff to be out there on the court.
As a club, we've shown that we will play our DPs. Last year we had Whitey and Shawnee Mack play a lot of minutes from a DP spot, and Scott likes to have a 13-man rotation.
The acting CEO says work is continuing to fill the final development spots. Forward fastman David Reynolds will be playing mentor at Symmons Plains. Penrite Racing's veteran has Kiwi Matt Payne under his wing.
Toughest thing to get your head around as a rookie, I think it's just the level of competition. You know, all the junior categories, there's probably about 3 or 4 guys that are good you're fighting against, maybe 5, but in our sport there's probably about 20 good drivers out there.
Payne had a rough time in Newcastle. A mix of food poisoning and nerves had him a bit sick in the car.
I was on the radio like, guys, I need a new suit, like I'm all being sick, and they didn't really understand what I meant, and so when they opened the door it was like, oh Jesus. So hey, like it happens to everyone.
Reynolds had the stomach last year though, reaching the podium. The Symmons Plains round is on next weekend. And on the back of our earlier story regarding the TSL's impending collapse, tonight's Friday Flashback is going back to where it all began. There was plenty of optimism in 2009 when the new incarnation of the State League kicked off. 10 founding clubs shook hands in the biggest shake-up to statewide footy this century. 9 years after the previous competition's demise, the TSL launched with Launceston beating Glenorchy at KG5 in the league's very first encounter. There were hiccups, like a player who exposed himself on the live television coverage, but by the time the first grand final rolled around, 2 southern heavyweights were ready to collide.
A big bear hug from Drury.
The contest was a classic. Clarence booted 6 unanswered goals in the second term to have the Magpies reeling, but in what looked like a comeback for the ages, Glenorchy drew the margin back to just 2 points midway through the fourth.
Big chance for Bowering. Jabba goes in and goals.
But the Clarence champion turned modern-day Devils coach had the long-range sealer.
Jeremy Webley, player of the year. Moment of the year, perhaps.
It proved to be. At the siren, the Roos were home by 16, and the crowd of 7,500 saw a great day's play. The club deserving of a premiership drink to celebrate. After all, it was Clarence's 10th senior flag in 17 years.
Good evening. First up tonight, the reason why Kim Miller isn't here. This workplace has an EBA allowing full-time staff the ability to take a day off for their birthday. So happy birthday, Kim. Of course, this little benefit doesn't apply to casual weather presenters, but I'll soldier on. Not worried about it, no. 17 in Hobart today, 14 for Launceston, 16 in Burnie and Devonport. Denali our high with 19 degrees, Grove 18, Smithton 17, Low Head, St Helens, Bushy Park and Flinders Island 16, King Island and Friendly Beaches 15 today, and Strawn, a coolish one, 13 the top. Zian, our top rainfall with 18 millimetres. The rest of the rain, of course, fell at Agfest as a frontal band moved through. That cloud also over southern South Australia and Victoria. Some cold air to follow as well. Some high-level clouds streamed over northern WA. Now tomorrow you can see how we're going to be facing cold southwesterly winds with the positioning of that high moving our way. It's dominating most of the mainland as well. Those southwesterly winds, for one and all, 10 to 20 knots, swells above 3 metres in the west and south. Into tomorrow we go. Temperatures on the way down. 13 for Hobart with a shower or 2. Maydena 9, a top of 10 for Oatlands. Launceston, a high of 14 degrees, a possible shower. Mostly sunny for Devonport and 14, -3 overnight for Lyowini, 6 the high. Burnie tomorrow expecting a top of 13 and mostly sunny. A showery day for Strawn, 12 and 12 the top for Marrawar. St Helens tomorrow, a high of 13. A shower or 2 for Swansea, 13 and 13 as well for Orford. Sunday, showers over the west, south and east coast with another cold day and snow to 600 metres. A cold start to Monday as a shower develops over the west and then extends over the south and King Island. And on Tuesday, showers again over the west, south and central regions. 20 tomorrow in Perth and showery there. Showers for Adelaide and Melbourne as well. And later on in the day in Canberra. Sydney a sunny 22, Brisbane even better 26. A cloudy evening in Hobart, 11 at the moment, 12 in Launceston, 11 right now in Devonport. Louise, I made the trek to AgFest today. No matter what the weather is, it's always great with the exhibitors from around the world, around the nation and around Tasmania. The gang from Tas Petroleum thought I might have looked good in the Macubra. What do you reckon?
You look good in anything, Murph. Thank you for that. Happy Friday. That's all your news for now. I'll be back later with updates. Thank you for joining us. Good night.